All right, AP World. So we went through a little sprint through all of this little kind of odds and ends of information, all um, directly and kind of indirectly connected to the Cold War. And so we're going to look at effects of the Cold War here in this part, and a little bit of this that will probably be a little bit of, well, some of this kind of loops back. Like we've already talked a bit about proxy wars. Um, but this is going to be one of the effects of the Cold War. And so again, just remember if you didn't really catch a full definition when we rumbled through it, I think really on the first day, a proxy war is when you have major powers, in the Cold War, mainly the United States and the Soviet Union, when these major powers help to bring about a war between other nations. Okay. The major power doesn't fight directly with each other. They are fighting conflict through, like a third party country, basically, okay, or third party countries sometimes. And so proxy wars, as we had mentioned before, is going to be one of these elements that we'll see as part of the Cold War. Yeah, it's kind of like the little puppet wars you see down there. Okay. Um, so let's take a look at, actually, we're going to start to kind of work our way through some of the kind of the events. And again, I told you I'd keep you guys limited on this. So kind of some of the big hits of the Cold War, historically speaking. First of all, let's start off with what is going on in Germany at the end of World War II. Unlike the end of World War I, when Germany basically never saw any foreign troops, cross their borders and occupy or stay in Germany, it's going to be very different. Germany now, being seen, whether you want to agree or disagree with that, but seen as having now started two major conflicts in the 20th century. Is going to be occupied. In other words, that means that foreign troops who have invaded into Germany, British troops, American troops, Soviet troops, are staying. Okay, at least for a while, they're staying. So one of the first things to be done in Germany is going to be the division, and Germany is going to be split into four sectors. And if you found my little um, cursor here. We've got British sector up here in kind of the northwestern part of Germany. You've got the Soviet sector up here in more of the northern central kind of part of Germany or eastern. You have the American sector down here in the south. And then even France gets a little sector. France, which helps out a little bit militarily at the end of the war. And as you'll notice, their sector has more of that connection to, the kind of the boundary area alongside France itself. And so this is the way things are going to be divided up. And then the capital, Berlin, which is deep inside the Soviet sector, is also going to be divided into four. Okay. And so the city each will have a British sector, an American sector, obviously a Soviet sector, and then a little French one in there. So that division happens in two different ways, for the whole country and for the capital. All right. One of the very first battles, if you want to think of it that way, of the Cold War happens just a few years after the war ends, 1948. Stalin is in a bit of a huff. The United States and Great Britain are talking about the fact that they don't see this division as being permanent. They see once Germany can be restored to a democratic government, once Germany can kind of get itself back into a place where it can be trusted, and the Allies believing that they'll kind of craft this process. The British and French do not believe that division will be permanent. That someday Germany is going to be back to being led by Germans, and they're committed to that. Joseph Stalin had zero interest in this. And again, his country has suffered dearly at the hands of the Nazis during World War II, and he sees that that punishment for that should be pretty much in perpetuity. That it's permanent, and that part of Germany will always be basically property of the Soviet Union. To try to drive home that point and to get basically the other allies to end this talk about wanting to plan the pressure that the British and the French are trying to put on the Soviet Union to change his thinking and to think about eventual self-determination for Germany. Stalin blocks off access to Berlin in 1948. Blocks off the roads, blocks off the railroads, everything like that, giving the Americans and British no access to Berlin, basically blocking off their sectors of Berlin, and pretty much kind of a case of blackmail, telling the United States and the British that he'll pull the blockade when the British and French make a pledge to him that there'll be no more of the talk about self-determination. And that, basically the British and French, British, French, and Americans can do what they want with their three sectors, but no more pressure on the Soviet Union. Eastern Germany is going to stay under Soviet control. And this ends up being the first kind of standoff where neither side is willing to give ground. And it drags on for months from 1948 to 1949. Finally, the United States starts an airlift and begins to drop aid, food, coal, all the kind of supplies that the Germans in their sectors and the Allied forces that are in there too, drops them from the air, and pretty much kind of daring the Soviet Union, are you going to shoot down our planes? Which the Soviet Union does not do. At that point, Stalin, realizes his plan has been foiled, and lifts the blockade reluctantly in 1949. Still holding to his position, adamant that Berlin and his part of Berlin and Eastern Germany is going to stay under Soviet control, Soviet influence, that sort of thing. So round one kind of is a bit of a standoff, but the Western Allies see it as a kind of a moral victory. And the blockade, also famously known for the irony of a lot of American pilots who, a few years before had been dropping bombs on Berlin, dropping food and supplies. The little kids in Berlin called them the candy bombers. Because the planes had come flying in low, and the pilots knew there were lots of orphaned kids and small children in Berlin, and they would purposefully take up loads of candy that they would drop out of the bomb bays to all these little cheering kids down below. The candy bombers. That probably won't be on the AP test, but it's a fun story all the same, right? Right. Fast forward to the early 1960s. The Soviets and their East German government, by this point, pretty much well established, a puppet government where the leaders are basically handpicked by Moscow, and government that is quote unquote East German, but really is totally controlled by the Soviet Union. They notice that they're having a bit of a population problem in Berlin, and they're having a bit of a population problem in Eastern Germany, and that is that more and more East Germans, are fleeing to the West. They know opportunity. Rebuilding in the East is going very slowly, while rebuilding of Germany in the West is moving at rapid pace because of the Marshall Plan, things like that. And more Germans are basically, they're voting with their feet, and they are leaving Eastern Germany, Eastern Berlin, and going to the West. A bit of that comes to a halt in 1961 when the East Germans build a wall, literally a big wall across the part of Berlin that separates their sector from the others. Hold on just a sec here. A little bit of life there. Anyhow, the Berlin Wall. In a lot of ways, and at the same time, they don't necessarily wall, but they kind of gate off the rest of Eastern Germany from the rest of the West, the British, French, and American controlled areas there. Excuse me. And really, a lot of people consider this wall, which again, I mean, whether you want to call it the East Germans, whether you really want to call it the Soviet Union at the end of the day, and it's been a real symbol of the Cold War. To the West, it's kind of the just. It sums it all up, that, you don't have to build a wall to try to, prevent people from coming in. You have to build a wall to trap your people inside. To the West, it's kind of a testament of just how well the Soviet system is working out for them over there. And a wall that once completed will stand until really the end of the Cold War, about 1989, 1990. Um, these Germans will build watchtowers. They will build, there'll be, barbed wire, razor wire at the top. Hundreds, if potentially thousands, of East Germans will die trying to get across the wall, to tunnel under it, to sometimes homemade gliders to try to fly over it. Uh, Anything else they can do to try to escape and get to what they see as the free West. And again, like I said, opportunity, all that kind of thing. Okay, that is your Berlin Wall. And just that kind of reminder that between number one, two, and three, that kind of phase one of the Cold War, there is a real focus on Germany and Berlin in particular. It's kind of the hot spots. Okay, all right. So Cold War alliances. Yes, we get the alliance systems that all kick into to place again. 1949 North Atlantic Treaty Organization is formed up. This is a powerful military alliance involving a bunch of the Western European countries and the United States. It is still a powerful alliance to this day. I think it starts off as a collection of about 12 or 13 countries. It's now up to 36, 37. And it is one of those mutual defense alliance systems, kind of like what we talked about, prior to World War One. An attack on one is an attack on all. And NATO is going to stand as a real kind of an anti-Soviet, anti-communist organization that is committed to not only acting in this mutual defense kind of nature to it, but also acting as a counter to Soviet influence in Europe. And yeah, the Soviet Union will form up a basically an alliance system of their own, which they call the Warsaw Pact. You have there. And the Warsaw Pact will pretty much be populated with countries that aren't really given a choice about joining. Most of them are the Eastern European countries that the Soviets had basically, liberated from the Nazis and then never left. And so, Poland, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, so on and so forth, will all make up the the Warsaw Pact countries, and that will be, the counter to NATO through this early part of the Cold War. All right, a couple others that I'll throw at you here. SEATO is the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization. And then CENTO is the Central Treaty Organization. And that one will be based a little bit more in the Middle East. And so these will be a couple of other alliance systems that are a little more West friendly. Okay, first of all, let's kind of put that out there. These are alliance systems to try to create some connections between countries in Southeast Asia and the Middle East, and there'll be a little bit more of a Western slant here, although that will change as the Cold War kind of changes as well, and we'll start to see some of that Soviet influence able to make its way into parts of Southeast Asia, most famously in Vietnam, and then we'll see a little bit of some of that will creep into Middle East and down in, well, we already talked about Africa, I think with Angola, so a little bit of that kind of thing. All right, I think we've already talked about that. Maybe we haven't. I don't know. If not, we'll come back and we'll get it later. We haven't. Okay. I'm getting ahead of myself. All right, fighting the Cold War. There's gonna be some examples where the Cold War actually gets kind of hot. All right. There's gonna be some proxy wars. The Korean War could, to a certain extent, be viewed as partially as a proxy war. In 1950, North Korea, which by this point in time is under heavy Soviet influence, but also Chinese, communist China influence as well. And so North Korea has established themselves as a communist-led country. Korea is basically divided at the 38th parallel at the end of World War II. with Russia and China, or excuse me, Soviet Union and China taking kind of the influence of the northern part, and then really, whether we're talking about kind of more like Western powers, United States having more of the influence in the South. In 1950, North Korea launches an attack against South Korea, wanting to unify the entire country under communism. And it's going to be one of the first times where the United States, the United Nations, NATO, all these organizations are going to kick in to try to contain communism here in Asia. You would say, no more. You're not going any further than this. And so a very brief but ugly war is fought. And the United States eventually, as part of the UN force, contributes troops. And so it's not directly the United States, in effect. It's part of a UN force that's involved helping to defend South Korea. When the UN steps in, they're able to push the North Koreans out of South Korea. Matter of fact, they're able to push them almost all the way back up to the border with China. And at that point, China sends in troops to back up North Korea. Anyhow, the war is unofficially ended in 1953. The decision to keep that 38th parallel, the dividing point, and an armistice is declared. An armistice, by the way, had never been settled. Okay, technically speaking, North and South Korea are still at war to this very day. The leaders of those two countries have never sat down to officially end this war. All right, strange fact for the day. Korean War is still an active war, and I've got a dog revolt. Be right back. Sorry, I have an unsteady truce here at the moment with the dogs. We'll see how well this works. All right. Anyhow, you got the Korean War taken care of there. All right. Next example of some pretty darn near hot war. Actually, this is pretty darn near World War III, and through a good chunk, really through most of the Cold War, this Cuban Missile Crisis is considered as close as we came to World War III. In 1962, Cuba, which had had its own little communist revolution in 1959, a guy by the name of Fidel Castro had thrown out an American-backed dictator, basically. And had established communism 90 miles off the coast of Florida. You could get down to Key West. You could almost breathe it in. You could smell the communism coming from, right across the water there. Well, in 1962, it's a September, October kind of range there. We're doing United States conducting a pretty routine spying flight over Cuba. And lo and behold, we discover that there are nuclear missile launching pads being built in Cuba. And lo and behold, we find out that it is the Soviet Union that is supplying missiles to Cuba so that they can aim them at the United States. And very quickly we realize that almost every major city in the United States is going to be within range of these missiles. In the early 60s, we still don't have intercontinental ballistic missiles that can really accurately, go from, one side of the world to the other. We'll get there quick enough, don't worry. But we didn't have the concerns about accurate strikes coming from the Soviet Union and landing here in the United States until this. Now we are worried because they're there. The United States makes this known to the world, what we have discovered. At first, the Soviet Union tries to deny it, and then when we show them the proof, the photo, recon photos and all that sort of thing, they have to okay. And it turns into about a 2-week standoff where the United States is pretty much taking things right up to the edge. Matter of fact, our president at the time, John F. Kennedy, was being strongly encouraged by some of his military advisors to just launch an attack on Cuba, to go in and destroy these missile sites. And Kennedy, listening to other advisors, chose to try to take a different course, worried that a military strike on Cuba would trigger war and would lead to that specter of World War III. In the end, the Soviet Union backs down and they remove the missiles. We, in turn, actually, the United States had set up some missiles in Turkey, one of our allies, and some missiles aimed at the Soviet Union. We quietly dismantled those, and so it's kind of a tit for tat kind of a thing. You take the missiles that you've set up aimed at our country real close by, and we'll take out ours, and that sort of thing. And that crisis is averted. But the leaders of both countries, Nikita Khrushchev was the leader of the Soviet Union at the time, and John F. Kennedy here in the United States, realized we had come really, really close, and that one wrong move could have been lights out, could have been the start of a general exchange of nuclear weapons. And there will be some measures taken to try to cool things down a bit after that, but some of the stuff we'll get to later on. Okay, looks like I'm going to finish off on the Vietnam War, and another example of what we can call proxy war, and this one taking place in Southeast Asia. Vietnam, actually, one of the guys who had led basically revolt against the Japanese who had seized Vietnam during World War II, a guy by the name of Ho Chi Minh. After the Japanese were defeated in World War II, he pretty much asked for assistance in helping to set up a government. The United States and the West kind of rebuffed him, and so he turned to the Soviet Union. And before you know it, Ho Chi Minh is kind of converting himself into a communist and is establishing communism in Vietnam. Very similar to Korea, Vietnam will kind of divide itself. A southern part that's going to be more Western influenced and supported, which will be non-communist, and then a communist north, and a war that will break out first when World War II ends. Initially, the French go back in to reestablish control of their colony, and the Ho Chi Minh and those his followers will begin a war, basically a war of decolonization against the French. By about the mid-50s, the French bail. They pretty much say, you know what, yeah, this isn't worth it, we're out. And they leave Vietnam. Almost as soon as they leave, though, the United States steps in, because we're not interested in a colony. We're interested in containing communism. And so we will get in and first of all start lending aid to the South Vietnamese government, supporting their military, things like that. By the time you get into the mid-1960s, our assistance is beginning to turn into direct military assistance. In 65, we start sending troops to Vietnam. And that's really when you get into the heart of our United States experience in Vietnam. The war will be fought like you got there over the next 10 years. It will be a rough experience for the United States. You'll get some more of this in U.S. history, but it's a war that is highly unpopular back at home, especially amongst the young people in the country. The United States is basically divided on whether we should be in Vietnam. And that doesn't bode well. Without the full support of the American people, the war is a struggle. And in 1975, the United States withdraws from Vietnam. It's kind of our first kind of defeat as a country, and Vietnam becomes a full-on communist country. And one of those fears that we had with containment was this concept of the domino theory. The United States had got itself involved in the war. In part because we believed if Vietnam fell to communism, then the rest of Southeast Asia would. Then it'd be Cambodia and Thailand and Laos and right on down the line. The Vietnam War proves that the domino theory is kind of bunk. Cambodia does a quick little flirtation with it, but no other Southeast Asian countries go communist, right? Anyhow. I'm already at 24 minutes, so I'm going to hit the brakes there, and we'll pick up a couple more of these examples of some hot Cold War when we're back together in class. That'll do us for now. Bye.